You've got to step up each Olympics.
The pressure is on with everybody.
You have to be a better athlete 4 years on, because if you haven't moved on, everybody else will. You're conditioning everyone else that they're racing for a silver medal, not a gold medal.
That's the dilemma, isn't it? When somebody brings a new sport in, whether they will continue it in the next cycle, it better be good.
The games have to stay modern. They have to stay relevant. My sport is always under threat. When we go to a games that doesn't have a rowing venue, I think we may get cut.
And is the Olympics really the pinnacle for every athlete?
Your last day at the office is the most important day of your life.
This is overwhelming. This is something that they can't even yet comprehend.
Who should we be looking out for?
One of the biggest names that everyone's got their eye on is Delicious Ori. He's a super heavyweight. Everyone's saying he's got those Joshua vibes.
What about on the track and field? Who are the star athletes?
Noah Lyles. I mean, he is the talker. He wants to be the best sprinter of all time. He's not afraid to say that he wants to be better than Usain Bolt.
Let's get to the water and the rowing.
But I would say we're probably going to win 6 or 7 medals, but it could be a lot of golds within that.
But one I'm really hoping will do well is Adam Peaty. He's been off with some well-being issues, some mental health issues. He's dealt with it, and that shows a real champion. Without a doubt, I think we will continue with our winning streaks and medal hauls. I actually think we're going to come back with our biggest medal haul.
Hello, I'm Natalie Sawyer, and this is Countdown to Paris. With the Olympic Games just around the corner, we thought it'd only be right to bring you the ultimate guide to the Games with talkSPORT and TikTok. Joining me to look ahead to Paris is double Olympic champion Dame Kelly Holmes, 5-time Olympic champion Sir Steve Redgrave, and former 3,000-metre steeplechase British record holder turned sports preventer covering everything from boxing to athletics is Joe Ankier. It's great to have you all with us, and excitingly, you're all going to be involved in talkSPORT's coverage of these Paris Games as well. Tokyo, that does seem a distant memory now, but when you think of the Olympics and the Games, Kelly, I'll come to you first. Does that just give you a buzz, knowing we're fast approaching these Games?
Yeah, it's always a really exciting time for a sporting calendar. I think the Olympics, everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you started sport at school, hated sport at school, I think when the Olympics comes round, we're all intrigued to see what's going to happen and see what the new talent come. And of course, it's in Paris, which is going to be spectacular, I'm sure.
Yeah, very much so. Steve, what makes the Games so special?
Very good question. I think from an athlete's point of view, it's the ultimate within sports. Certainly of even sports that haven't been involved in Olympics before, they still worship the Games and enjoy watching it. The golfers, before they came in 2 games ago, is that they always loved watching the Games and they want to be part of it. And it's that thrill of the individual sports that have their own recognition at their own World Championships, World Cups or whatever. But it's that collective element of coming together that makes it so special.
Yeah, and Joe, obviously I mentioned you were an athlete, but you now turned broadcaster. This is going to be your 4th Games that you've covered as a broadcaster. So for you, what's that experience like, going into a new one?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, my 5th Games in total to attend. I've covered 4, well, it'll be my 4th as a broadcaster. Always different. Tokyo, of course, was very different because we didn't have the crowds in the stadium. It was obviously the COVID Olympics. I think that's also what's going to make Paris so special this year, because everyone's so excited to get back to that really big Games in front of the fans and have, you know, those podium celebrations with countries cheering. What makes it so special? For me, I've had a lot of athletic friends over the years who are former training partners, former competitors. Even as a broadcaster, I've had the pleasure of interviewing some of those. I got to interview Mo Farah after he won his gold in Rio, and I used to live and train around the world with Mo. I remember going for runs with Kelly in South Africa, myself and Mo. I've gotten to commentate one of his races. And so there's been that bit of familiarity, family, friends, as well as seeing the sport that I love and getting to see so many other sports as well at the same time.
Oh, well, that's what it is. It's an eye-opening experience for many of us, lucky enough to be there, but even just watching and listening in, it's just that you'll find sports that you probably never even thought of or considered to keep across, and suddenly you become just engrossed in it. And that's what these Games will bring us, I'm sure. What about standout memories? Kelly, if I come to you again, what would be the moment for you that would stand out, whether as an athlete competing or just even watching?
Yeah, there's many over the years. I mean, obviously, a lot of us are inspired by an Olympic Games. So my first one ever was watching Sebastian Coe win the 1,500 metres in the 1984 Olympic Games.
Well, that
of course,
was a long
that's
time
all
ago.
right, wasn't it? But then you had Tessa Sanderson, who's celebrating 40 years of winning her gold at those same games, and now has become a friend and is coming on talkSPORT as well. So you have a connection with athletes over the years. Once, if you've seen somebody who's been inspired, and then over the years as an athlete you get to know them, you know that we're all the same. We're just like always got a hunger to be successful. We might have had a talent, but then ultimately we've got to fulfill it in whatever way that was. But you know, making it more recent. A Super Saturday, of course, will stand out for so many people. 3 gold medals in that amazing stadium in 45 minutes. You know, it blew, I think, the crowd away by being in part and being in that moment. And I think it just showed that, you know, for us in London, even though we'd had so much success, hadn't we, in London anyway, when you have those moments in a stadium where, of course, it's sort of the towards the end of the game, something like that was, really inspiring. But I mean, I could sit all day. I've had so many moments. You know, I was at the same Olympics, obviously, as Steve, after him saying that he was going to give it up and anyone had permission to shoot him. And then 4 years later, he wins his 5th gold medal.
Didn't learn his lesson, did he? No. Glutton for punishment, some might say, Steve. But yeah, I mean, your association with the Olympics in terms of competing goes a bit further back.
You're saying I'm old.
A bit further back, I'm saying, Steve. But what, 1984 was your first games?
I've just missed out on the Moscow Games because of the political situation there. We'd made the qualifying time, but we were at the bottom of the pile at that time. So when funding got reduced, I would have been an 18-year-old if I'd gone to Moscow. But my memories of a 10-year-old of watching Mark Spitz winning 7 gold medals, all of them in world record times. And that blew me away as a 10-year-old. I didn't know what rowing was at that time, but that gave me the dream of trying to become an Olympic champion. I just didn't know when or what sport it may be at that time. Talking about LA, that I was in the stadium where Decker and Bud got tripped and that was pretty amazing of only being a couple of 100 metres away from where that happened and the dramatics from that. And then more personally, of 4 years later in '88 when the hockey team won, is that my wife Anne and I were in the stands watching, but we knew a couple of the players quite well. I know most of them really well now. But when they won their gold, is that we went down onto the pitch, and when they got their medals, we were standing next to the rostrum as they were getting. You wouldn't get anywhere near that now. But that's where the games have changed in recent years. And as Kelly was saying, is that I've just given a few minutes to think of something, and you're coming out, and those memories come flooding back.
Yeah, I mean, you said 2004, Joe, obviously is one that stands out, having watched both Kelly and Steve win their respective gold medals. Well, 2 for some, Kelly, winning that particular games. Any other memories that would stand out for you?
Oh, absolutely, and again, could go on all day. I mentioned Mo Farah as well, having grown up and trained around the world with him, and we had a friendship since we were 13 years old. So I got to interview him after his first gold in Rio, and then they put me on commentary for his 10,000, which, if you remember, he fell over and got up and won. So it was very hard commentating when your friend is winning gold at the Olympic Games. So I had to hold my cool. And then, if I'm allowed to move away from Great Britain, at Tokyo, one of the moments that just brought me to tears. Gianmarco Tamberi, who's the Italian high jumper, who's a really big personality, and he gets the crowd riled up. He's called the half shave because he shaves his beard for the final. Well, he and the Qatari athlete who had been training together through their injuries in the off season and become friends, they decided to share the gold medal. I don't know if you remember that one. But they were jumping on each other and crying, and Gianmarco had his cast from his injuries, and it was just such a special, it brought me to tears. Watching it from a hotel room, unfortunately, because during Tokyo we weren't allowed to run around to all the different events because of COVID restrictions, but that was a beautiful moment. And it shows also the Olympic spirit. They chose to share their gold medal.
Yeah, and that is what the Olympics really is all about. We've got 32 sports, 4 have been introduced by the Paris Olympic organisers themselves, one of which is breaking. That's a complete new sport being brought into the Games. So I'm hoping you're all going to turn out with you being a B-boy or a B-girl. You're going to throw down some sort of shapes, whether it's a freeze or a windmill, and we're all going to enjoy it. But this is also the beauty of the Games, that we are seeing innovation. We are seeing new sports introduced, so new eyes might be coming onto the Games as well, Steve.
Yes, no. Sometimes you still think, oh, that's a bit weird sport to be introduced. But actually, the games have to stay modern. They have to stay relevant to everybody that's competing, and that does mean that some sports or some disciplines within sports that have to stand out. My sport is always under threat because of the cost of it is to put rowing venues in. And I think we're lucky enough for the next 2 games at least is that we've got a venue where we can compete, and so it'll be in. My worries is when we go to a games that doesn't have a rowing venue, I think we may get cut, and I think that's a big shame across the board of the mentality and the process that rowing brings to all the sports as being part of the founder sports. But of the new sports coming in of the rock climbing of 3 years ago in Paris, I was riveted to that. Again, watching on TV, even though that I had a pass to be there. It was a strange Games 3 years ago, and we've got a lot of athletes that were still blown away from the experience of going to to their events at those Games. But now some of them are competing again. They're going to see a different level that we got to experience.
Yeah, I mean, other sports that are reintroduced, they were in Tokyo, like you've mentioned, the sport climbing. There is skateboarding and also surfing as well. But breaking is the first time that we're going to see break dancing involved.
I was just going to say about the breaking, because I just think it's really interesting. So I was under the opinion, I was like, it better be good to get a gold medal. That's the first thing I thought. And then
we're looking for high standard here.
Yeah, high standard. But then I was thinking about it, and because it's the young kids, isn't it? So it's 16-year-olds, I think. So they had it in their youth games, Youth Olympics. And it's been introduced, as you said, by Paris. But what I think for me is very special about that is really great role modelling. So there'll be young people that are watching the Olympics that are inspired, like we may have been, and think, oh, it's such a distant reach. Whereas as a young person, if you are into that type of sport or whatever it is, when you see younger people taking part and it's possible, I think that's really, really important. And with breaking, I mean, obviously I've had to do my research because I didn't know about this at all. But they're saying about the fact that the system is around creativity, personality, technique, variety, performing and musicality. All of those elements to be good at a sport is really important for a young person in life generally. So I think it's a really great introduction. Whether it stays after Paris, who knows? Because that's the dilemma, isn't it? When somebody brings a new sport in, whether they will continue it in the next cycle. But I think for this one, it's great to see it. Why not?
Yeah. I think it will stay. Is that a huge history within the sport of being a street sport originally, and of people that never got the opportunity of doing mainstream sports that we got involved in. It's bringing that sort of element through, that there is a pathway, whatever your background, of whatever your situation is. And that's what sport should be, and that's what Olympics should be at the forefront of it all. I
mean, I can't imagine at the age of sort of 15, 16 that you might be competing in your first ever Olympics, which we are going to be seeing in Paris. Obviously, we've got Sky Brown, skateboarder for Team GB. Phoebe Gill's only, 17 as well. In terms of that first ever Games, how nerve-wracking was that to be involved in? I mean, even Joe, for yourself as a broadcaster, to actually be broadcasting your first game, this essentially is going to be my first. So I'm excited but nervous at the same time.
Yeah, first of all, I competed in World Championships, Commonwealth Games, Europeans. So again, I can speak to nerves on those parts. Olympics, it does have that extra special feeling though. Coming in as a broadcaster for me, the first one was London. I was very involved with the Olympic bid. I think Kelly remembers being in a video with me. That helped to win us the Games. And so it was a special moment for me. It was also tough because the network I worked for didn't quite have the rights. So we had a great setup, big American network. We were just about 100 feet behind the stadium stadium though. So I was seeing all my childhood friends winning medals in the stadium that I had to make that decision whether to come back and compete in London or go into the broadcasting. And that was a little bit bittersweet because I was watching them all become heroes in their own towns. Mo Farah's face was on a stick the very next day when I walked around the village, which was very surreal for me to see. But in terms of the nerves, yeah, I mean, it's a big role. You're broadcasting globally. There's a lot of sports to remember, as I'm sure you're getting to grips with now. But you get involved, you start to enjoy it, and it's a different kind of level of nerves of live TV.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Joe's just saying there, you can compete in all these different sort of world championships and other competitions, but there is something about the Olympics. This is a little bit different. So when it was your first games, Kelly, what was that like, that experience? What did you learn from it to take you forward into the next?
I think every athlete has a completely different first games experience, because I think it's one about either your age or if you've had a Commonwealth Games prior to it, which is another multi-sport event or a big major game. So I think we all deal with it differently. I mean, mine was when I was 26 and I was also serving full-time in the military. So it was a little bit different because I had a different mindset back then to what the games meant. They were obviously something that I'd always wanted to do since I was 14. So to go to the first games, that's the piece that's almost kind of like, wow. But I went to Atlanta, and to be honest, I don't think they were the best games, not just from a performance point of view across the board, but it was very commercialised. So for somebody wanting to go to the games, it was about the Olympic spirit and the Olympic ideal and, you know, feeling like, oh my God, it's all about us. I didn't get that feeling, if I'm totally honest. But that's just because there, and also being 26, I was a little bit more in tune with, you know, and in control of my nerves as such. But going to my second games in Sydney, I was blown away. I would actually say that was one of the best games that they've ever had pre all the sort of social media and that influx, because it was about the athletes. It was very much about us competing and the Australian community really embracing what the games meant for them, for a country. So I had different feelings at each games, but having worked with and know a lot of younger athletes that are going to their first games, including Phoebe Gill, this is overwhelming. This is something that they can't even yet comprehend and get into their mindset. They don't have the vision of what Olympic Village is like. They don't really know the enormity of the games and how widespread it is, and getting on the, you know, the coach to go out to your venue. I mean, they don't know those sort of pieces that you only really get to feel when you're actually in the team. So it is a big, big deal.
Yeah, learning on the job, I guess, is what it is, Steve, to really savour it and understand what you're about to experience.
Very much so. Obviously, I mentioned a little bit earlier the disappointment of not going to Moscow, but then becoming favourites to win a gold medal 2 months before the Games in '84. Then you go into your first games, but then also got of the pressure of expectation on you as well. Fortunately, that expectation wasn't as huge as it was when the time we got to 2000 and going for my fifth. Is that in '84, I remember that of the BBC that was broadcasting, Des Lynam sitting in the desk like you're sitting there now, and said, "Oh, we've got a chance of a medal in rowing. We're going over to Lake Casitas." That was our build-up. And then suddenly we're on the start line of there. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time, but as an athlete that of going to games, LA was fantastic. Is that I hadn't been to America before, so first time to there, going to sort of the LA and Hollywood, and even though we were based up in Santa Barbara, it was just magical of being part of this thing as a kid growing up and seeing all these Olympics. And as a country, we didn't win very many gold medals, so you knew all the names of all the people, and now I've met most of those people, of all those people that won, and call them personal friends, which is something to be. But I remember of being on the start line in the final, is that the umpire went through the roll call of the 6 boats in the final, and I was thinking, I'm 22. I know that we're favourites. Well, if it doesn't happen today, I think I'm young enough to be able to do one more games after this. So perhaps I'll have another chance. And you're supposed to be fully focused on what you're doing. And I'm thinking I've got another chance in 4 years' time. Yeah. And nobody knows what that could end up being. But then as soon as the starter finished the roll call, then you sort of switch back into race mode. And I suppose that's the start of a history being made for me.
What did you think of Sydney as a game?
Sydney was absolutely fantastic,
Yeah.
of every element, because I knew it was going to be my last games. Is that I'm known of being quite grumpy in the sporting world. You know me too well.
And we're learning as well, Joe.
In Sydney, the team management would talk about what's wrong with Steve. He seems to be happy and seems to be enjoying things, and they were getting concerned. After the semi-final, I switched back into my moody self. I wouldn't say I was that moody, but it was just sort of the focus of doing what you were there to do. And there was relief at that point in the team management meeting that they used to have every evening of the little things that they can still try and put right into that. And there was a lot of relief on that. But it was just absolutely fantastic. One of the things about Atlanta was the transport. The transport system just broke down, is that they didn't have the volunteers that they hoped that they would get. And so as a bus driver, they were given a sheet of A4 paper with their route on and nothing else. Then the police would come in and close a road.
Yes.
So they'd get diverted, but then they've got no map, nothing where they were going to.
Well, in Tokyo, we had automatic driverless cars.
Oh, that's a bit different.
Yeah. So things change.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see.
nerve-wracking getting into one of those?
It was strange, but you're in Japan. You know they have all this technology and AI, and it'll be interesting to see if there's anything new in Paris.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously, we talked about the debutantes, but there are athletes that are going to be going through another Olympic cycle. It's 3 years, obviously, because the Tokyo Games were delayed by a year into 2021. When you're building up to another Games that you've already competed in, how does that differ? Does it not differ? Are you always doing the same sort of thing? And is the Olympics really the for every athlete?
You've got to step up each Olympics. Of winning a gold medal each of the 5 games that I went to, is that I've got a pretty level platform of viewing it all in some ways. But you have to be a better athlete 4 years on. Or 3 years on of where we are now. Because if you haven't moved on, everybody else will. And so even if you win a gold medal at the previous games and want to carry on, you're able to carry on of fitness and health, you've still got to be quicker than you were before. And that's the sort of the main process through your training and preparation. There's a great story that I tell quite a lot about a swimmer called John Nabber. And he was part of the Munich Games, and he helped the swimming team qualify for the American team. And then Mark Spitz came in and swam in the final and took the gold medal. And he sort of set himself a target of he wanted to win that relay and he wanted to win the individual discipline, which for him was the backstroke 100 metres. And he came out and he looked at all the past records and started planning things out. And you think that gold medal is going to be won in 55.5 seconds. That's where I've got to be. His problem his personal best at the time was 59.5 seconds. So it almost challenged him not to even try, because how can you go 4 seconds quicker on your back in a swimming pool? But he I won't go into the details of it now, but he planned it out. And the gold medal, which he did win after winning the relay gold as well, was in 55.49 of a second. So predicting of where you need to be. And actually, if you look back through history, that gives you an element of where the future is going to be.
Yeah, that's always changing.
A man can't run 100 metres in no seconds. There's got to be a barrier of somewhere. But whatever gold medal, whatever a record is set, sooner or later somebody comes out and beats it.
It's AI technology, Steve. You never know. We might see that in the future.
Yeah.
But in terms of, is it the pinnacle for you when you consider
It
your
is. I
career?
mean, I'd answer that slightly different, because I think every sport is different, but also if I went to my first games, I ran with a stress fracture, for example. I came fourth, getting pipped on the line. My next aim for 4 years is that I still had a dream of being an Olympic champion. So in my head, it's like I still have to keep going for that 4-year period to try and, one, fulfil a dream, but also I now want a medal. So I get to the next 4 games 4 years later. Now, in between that, in our sport and other sports, you have multiple other championships. So each year is very, significant to you, and you never know if you are going to get to that next 4 years, but that's your aim. I get to my next 4 years, I only have 6 weeks of training, running. The rest of it was obviously training in the gym. I get a bronze medal. Now, I was 30, so I then have to make a decision, do I carry on for a 4-year period? And what's that based on? Am I still fit enough, still motivated enough, still have the dreams and aspirations, and can I keep injury-free? And have I still got another drive? And I did, because that bronze, whilst it was like gold for 3 weeks, because I didn't expect to get it, it wasn't gold. So in my mind, yes, Olympic was always the pinnacle of an athlete's career in my sport, and every sport's very different, but in my sport it was. So I have to keep going for 4 years. And of course, then I'm more mature. I've finally get over some of the issues that I was having when I got to my 3rd Olympic Games, and the first year in 7 without an injury, and the mindset that I have to do this, and this is what why I've stayed in the sport. So from my perspective, each 4 years was a different reason for keeping going. And you have to remember that some athletes that go to this Games, it's either definitely going to be their last one, so they are hoping that they will have the end career that they've always wanted. It's going to be some first Olympic Games, so of course, you know, they're either going to do however well they do, and then their early days in their career. So, of course, it's inevitable that they're going to go to the next Games and hopefully the next Games. So I think it's very different for every athlete going, depending on what stage you're at the career. I feel more sorry for those that are either holding on, you know, they've coming towards the end of their career and they didn't maybe get into Tokyo, and they've kept going for another 4 years, and they hope. And those that are going to retire, knowing that this is their last Games, it becomes another mindset, because you don't want to end. No one really apart from Steve, no one really wants to end their career, but it's inevitable you are. So some people are going into this thinking, this is my last chance saloon, or I'm holding on to get the best I can, or this is my chance, I can do whatever I want to do. So it's very different for everybody.
Yeah, ultimately those athletes, they want to end on a high, don't they?
Always.
Of course they do.
That's the difference between, I totally agree with Kelly there. Some of the difference is that when you retire from work, your last day at the office is a celebration of what you've done. For an athlete, if you're not injured or had other issues of getting there, your last day at the office is the most important day of your life. And that's the difference between of a sport relative to the workplace.
Joe, if we talk to you as the athlete then, in terms of what it was like for you when you were building up to the respective tournaments, the big tournaments that you were involved in, how did you prepare? How did you deal with nerves? And even within races, how do you remain focused when there's so much going around you?
Yeah, it's tough. One thing I remember Kelly saying to us, I think, as a group back in the day, was when you have trouble sleeping because of nerves, I don't know if you remember saying this, she said, it's not the night before, it's the night before the night before. She said, if you can't sleep the night before your race, don't worry. As long as you got good sleep 2 nights earlier. And that stuck with me a lot. And I've had great advice from a lot of other athletes. At the Commonwealth Games, Darren Campbell said to me before I walked out in front of an 85,000-seater stadium in Melbourne, which for me was the biggest crowd I'd ever ran in front of. And I said to him just before, I said, I'm not even going to look around. I'm just going to look at the ground and just walk out, because that's going to throw me. And he said, no. He said, you've worked so hard to get to this point. When you walk to that start line, you look up and you take it all in, and you look around and tell yourself, I've earned this, this is my moment, and enjoy that crowd. And so I did. And in terms of the nerves, I always felt a bit sick before the start line. That 5 minutes, they're laughing because they know it. But you're just waiting to do your strides and get to that start line. Oh, you have those moments, or I had those moments of, why do I put myself through this? Why am I doing this? But when that start gun goes, it's just zone, and all of that disappears.
I always say nerves is a good thing, because it means you care. So that's one thing we can come away with this. If you're nervous, it means you do care about something. But something we haven't really talked about very briefly is life in the Olympic Village and what that is like for everyone. Was it 10,500 athletes? Maybe not all of them all within one place, because there are some sports that are located not in Paris itself, but life in the village. Is it as hectic, crazy as we all make?
Well, there's another 5,000 on that of the coaches and support staff and everything else. So it's almost a town and not a village of 15,000 people within it. And it's huge. The eating halls that sort of have got me is that of going to a couple of World Championships before going to the Olympics, is that we stay in the hotel, you have set meal times, the food is almost set, there's not much choice. And at Olympics, they're just huge, great big, like sort of aircraft carrier of size, and just table after table after table and several stations where you can pick up almost any food that has to be catered for every culture across the world. And that was pretty amazing. From a sport that needs their calories of 6,000 to 7,000 per day, even though that we're tapering down and not supposed to be eating that, is 24-hour food is just unbelievable. And the problem is, one of the sides to that is that you'll have tapered down your training. There's the boredom that comes in. The rooms that you stay in tend to be quite small, and they tend to double up the room, so there's 2 in a room instead of the student accommodation that it tends to be normally where there's 1 person in the room. So it's pretty cramped from that. One of the things that we tried to do in 2012 was that decorating the rooms with communities from London that came from the same culture of those areas. So letters in their own of native language and stuff like that. Just those little touches that made a big difference. But normally it's just whitewashed walls. And so you tend to stand sitting around in the dining halls quite often. You have your meal and then you think, well, what am I going to do? I'm pretty bored now. Don't really want to go back to my room. So you think, sort of some athletes from your sport, maybe from a different country, or you get to meet some of the athletes from your own sport that you don't get, from your own country you don't normally get to meet. And being able to sit down and chat with them. And so you don't just go and sat there, you go and get a cup of coffee and some cookies or whatever it may be. And you can overeat very easily.
Yes. If it's 24/7, then why wouldn't you? You'd be indulging a lot, wouldn't you? Obviously, we have a sir, we have a dame for your services to sport. Do you ever, use that as a little card to get access into places? Look at me, I'm Dame Kelly Holmes.
I don't. My PA does. She's like, she has to have a bath in her hotel room. Dame Kelly Holmes, can she have a bath? No, I don't. I mean, obviously privileged and honoured to get a title. It's not what you expect. It's not what you dream of. It's not what you go into sport for at all. But, you get it. And obviously there's always going to be privileges with that. And you have to recognise that in one way, that we are in a position where we might get more than other people do, but it's not for us going, oh, by the way, my name's Dame Kelly. I'd never do that. I'd be so humiliated. Somebody goes, oh, and well, I don't care. So no, never do that. But, it's honour. Can I just go back to that village, please? Because I find it fascinating, an Olympic village. I really do. And the same Commonwealth Games, right? We had villages
but I
as well.
also have been in the Olympic Village Village. Not sure I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Oh, got taken around.
No, but it is a really big moment, that, because it is very overwhelming. It is like a little city, a little town. And what is really special is that every team, they have to go around in your national kit. So you have to go around in national kit. You have all the flags from all the nations all dotted around the whole village. It's too big to walk most of it, so they have the little transport, which I'm sure will keep going in this one. But also they have things like hairdressers, cinemas, gymnasiums where people can finish off some of their training. You've got the physios, which are maybe a main physio, a medical team set up for all the nations, and then every country might have their own setup depending on what they've got. And you say about the food hall. I mean, it's about the size of a football pitch, if you put that to perspective.
Wow, that's huge.
And you have all these long tables, and you go around with your tray and you get all the food that you want. And my most abiding memory, I have two, but my most abiding memory was going in, and as an athlete, we went in a little bit later than the swimmers and all the other teams. So we're coming in. And I remember going in, and there was this little guy, and I don't know for the life of me what country he was from, but he came back and he's got this tray and it was literally piled up. And so I started talking to him. I said, oh, have you finished? What have you done? He says, no, I'm still competing. But he was from a country that, they got the honour to come and compete for their country, and it was the best thing that would ever happen to him, that freedom to have what he wanted, to be part of the Olympic movement. And I just always remember this little guy with this big tray. But it is overwhelming, and that is one part for the young athletes that they've got to then hopefully be mentored by the more established athletes of how you keep your feet on the ground, and you're focusing at that moment on your competition, and then only after that can you let yourself loose, because otherwise you can get get carried away with it.
And the Olympic Village, it changes as the games go on, right?
Yeah.
Because some athletes have finished competing and they're starting to let loose, and then you've got other athletes, the athletics goes to the end, who need to kind of move away from those people and focus.
Yeah, different experiences all around.
Well, that reminds me of a story in Atlanta, is that the first day of competition, so night of the opening ceremony, next day, Matthew and I started racing the next day. So we've been out training, came in for lunch into the village, got our lunch. There was a Polish shooter that came and sat opposite us. He had an Olympic gold medal around his neck. And you're thinking, it's hardly started, and he's got something that we're aiming for another week. And you sort of don't want to see it, but you want to see it. It's scary, but that's right. As the week goes on, I think it's got to be the worst discipline for many reasons. It is the men's marathon. It's the last event. Is that quite often? I remember in Barcelona of being in for the closing ceremony, and the first 50 were allowed to go into the stadium, and they literally ran. Everyone else had to be passed and finish in line somewhere else. Then they're sort of exhausted, obviously, from that event. Then they're sort of brought out for their medals. They had their medals, and then the closing ceremony happens. And the games are over. Everyone thinks, it must be Party City after the following week. But actually, the day after it empties very quickly, and everyone's moving on to the next thing.
Well, the beauty of the games is, as you rightly point out, medals can be won pretty quickly, pretty much from day one, which is really exciting. We'll talk about Team GB's hopefuls in just a moment. We're going to be looking forward to watching plenty of iconic sport in iconic venues in the coming weeks. But of course, we'll be eager for our Team GB athletes to do well and bring home plenty of medals. So it's only right that we sort of look at the hopefuls, perhaps, for Team GB. I'll come to you first, Joe, because you're going to be covering this for talkSPORT, boxing, athletics, maybe a bit more as well. Boxing itself, that's one of the big sports for Team GB normally, and we've seen loads of careers spawned from the games. Who should we be looking out for this time?
So we've got 3 men and 3 women on the boxing squad this time. It's actually been an achievement in itself to get that many, because they've had a tough time, in particular with this cycle. They normally have their squad come around a lot earlier. I say one of the biggest names that everyone's got their eye on is Delicious Ori. He's a super heavyweight. He got gold at the Commonwealths, gold at the Europeans. He's a great personality, good media talker, university educated, and everyone's saying he's got those Joshua vibes. And we all know how Joshua won at the London 2012 Olympics, how well he's done. And so super heavyweight, another one who is coming through and getting those comparisons. So if he comes out with a good colour of a medal, he'll be the next Anthony Joshua.
OK, so that's the name to look out for. I was chatting to Pat Brown as well in the heavyweight division, and he's really eager to get going. But he's saying that eventually he would love to go full-time as a pro, but maybe it's starting at cruiserweight. It would be the weight he was thinking of. But again, another name perhaps to maybe look out.
Yeah, he's young, Pat Brown. So they didn't expect him to make these Olympic Games. They were looking at him for Los Angeles, but he's come through earlier than expected. He's a heavyweight rather than super heavyweight, aggressive, hard-hitting, and definitely one for the future. Maybe he'll get a medal now. Even if he doesn't, they're saying he'll be a superstar down the road.
Yeah. What about on the track and field? What should we be looking out for, Kelly? What would you say? Who are the star athletes for us?
I actually think we're going to come back with our biggest medal haul. I think we've got some fantastic athletes at the moment right across the board on both track and field, actually. The names, if I go to my sport first, of course, I just think it's going to be the best middle distance races we've ever had. You know, we have probably 4 out of the 8:15 world-class time athletes at the moment. You've got Keely Hodgkinson, who's obviously favourite. I hate saying this about putting gold medals around the neck, because until you're in the final, you don't know, right? But on paper, without a doubt, she's world lead, national record holder, and should be the one to watch for the 800 metres. But you've also got the young Phoebe Gill that we said. It's going to be her first games. It'll be very overwhelming. Whatever she does is a fantastic achievement. And Gemma Ricci, who's also one of the best in the world, who has again, as good as medal chance as Keely in the 800. Then you have Laura Muir and Georgie Bell in the 1500 metres, who are both, again, medal potential. So for those events, I mean, I'm
Josh
so
Kerr
excited.
as well on the men's.
Then I was going to say, in the men's 1,500 metres, you've got Josh Kerr, who again is one of the favourites to win his event. And then some of the other ones that I just like, in the pool, I was over at the pool at the Olympic Park, and the divers are all so ready to get some great medal hauls, and Tom Daley, of course, has come back. But one I'm really hoping will do well is Adam Peaty. He was off with a really, he's been off with some well-being issues, some mental health issues, but he's come back strong again. He's dealt with it, and that shows a real champion who can go through some personal issues. He's obviously Olympic champion, multi-medalist anyway, but if he comes back and does well in the pool, I'll be so pleased with him from a personal level.
So many highlights, hopefully, for Team GB then for us to look forward to. Before we talk about the rowing and their chances, Steve, just in terms of the 100 metres, the men's final in particular, it always seems to be the stardust event of any games. You've got Noah Lyles, who is just this incredible character from Team USA. Zarnell Hughes, the Team GB hopeful, perhaps not in the best of form currently, Joe, but in terms of that 100-metre final, is it something everyone just has to stop and watch?
Well, I'm so excited that we've got this new personality, Noah Lyles. I mean, after Usain Bolt retired, I think a few people were concerned about athletics because he was such a big force of nature, wasn't he? But we found one, Noah Lyles. I mean, he is the talker. He won all 4 medals at the, he won all the medals at the World Championships last year. He said he's going for 4 medals this time, the 100, 200 and both of the relays. He wants to be the best sprinter of all time. He's not afraid to say that he wants to be better than Usain Bolt, and he's got the talk. He's got the gift of the gab to match it. So we saw him at the London Diamond League on Saturday, smashed his personal best in the 100. He's not even got the fastest time yet in the 100, but he got a PB and he wasn't happy with it. So that says it all. Over the 200, 19.31, 4th fastest all time. That's a phenomenal time. And so his 200 is stronger than his 1. He's the man to be, unless something goes wrong. I don't see anyone beating him. But Zarnell Hughes, he's come close. He had a very good year last year. This year, I'm not sure exactly what's happened, if there were some injuries or something. He's not quite in form, but things can happen on the day and maybe he'll come through.
OK, so in terms of that's the track and field. Let's get to the water and the rowing, Steve. Tokyo wasn't great for Team GB with when it comes to the rowing disciplines, but have they got better chances this time around? Will there be, because there were no golds won at Tokyo, I should say.
Yeah, we won 2 medals, silver and bronze. And that was very disappointing. At the beginning of my career, we would have been really excited about of those medals, but the sport has been very consistent at Olympic level. There were athletes that were capable of winning gold, and we wouldn't have been surprised if 2 of our boats got gold in Tokyo. The difference is now is that they're very, very strong. Basis of that same team of experience being added to it as well. We've got 4 boats that are reigning world champions, and we've got 10 boats qualified out of the 14 events that we have, and all of them have got medal chances. But I would say we're probably going to win 6 or 7 medals, which will be our second best ever, 2012 being our best, but it could be a lot of golds within that of 3, 4 or possibly 5.
Wow. It really is a case of we won't want to miss a thing because there's so much to look forward to at these Paris
Lightweight
Olympics.
women's double are almost guaranteed gold medal. You can never, that's putting pressure on. They came 4th at last Olympics and were bitterly disappointed, and they've hardly been beaten since then. And in the last 2 years, they haven't been beaten at all. So injury-free, they are the ones to beat. That everyone's thinking we can't touch them. Let's hope that's the case.
Indeed, yeah. Just sort of finally, just getting back onto yourselves as athletes. We're talking about Noah Lyles and what a character and personality he is. He backs it up, though. He's very assured of himself, but he does back it up with the results. Mind games, is that something you ever got involved in, Kelly?
Not really. I don't think our events were conducive to that as such, although, the pressure is on with everybody. The hardest bit I found ever was going from our call room, which is a track that outside of the stadium, so you have a warm-up track outside the stadium, sometimes two, and you then go to call room 1, call room 2, and call room 1 is where you sort of walk from your warm-up track underneath the stadium down to call room number 2. Right. And there are a few mind games happening then, because you've got those athletes that are sort of really jittery and just, and they're like, and I'm just thinking, oh God, because you just want to try and calm the nerves at this stage. And you do have those, and they always talk about the 100 metres men, of course. They're always playing mind games. But it's that whole thing of, at that moment, you have to stick with your own preparation, and it's how do you take your mind away from what other people are doing, because it can really be distracting. I do remember one thing, though, what helped me was that I used to stop watching my competitors warming up and start watching the hammer throwers and the shot putters, because I was fascinated by the way they were warming up, and it just sort of almost kept my mind away from what I was about to do, because you can't change that. You're going to go and do it anyway. So we didn't have it as much in our disciplines, but you can definitely see it on some of the other sports, and mainly the men's 100 metres.
Well, it's so quick. They've got to do something to keep themselves up for it, I suppose. Steve, yourself and your team?
Not really. Is again, you're very isolated. So you boat about 30 minutes before race time, and then you're in your boat. You're isolated, even though that there are other boats out there warming up at the same time. Is there any mind games before that? No, not really. Being a muscular endurance event is that you've got to be big and strong, but you've got to be able to move that strength. And once you get more to the endurance side of it, is that then that's harder for the main games, because you've either got it or you haven't. But the mind games that I used to play was the 4 years in between. Is that you try and win as many races as you possibly can. You're conditioning everyone else that they're racing for a silver medal, not a gold medal. You believe that, and I think that's more mind of boosting yourself, because everyone that gets into the final feels that they may be favourites of where they may be within that 6-boat final. They've all got their race tactics of what they're going to do. And they're all in that moment. So the mind games for me were conditioning that you're racing for silver or less.
Yeah, they were already onto a losing start. That's what you're saying. Look, we haven't even scratched the surface of the medal hopefuls for Team GB. We haven't even thought about the gymnastics, Max Whitlock, trying to create history. The question that I have for you finally, and it's a yes or no, can this be a record-breaking games then in terms of a medal haul for Team GB? Joe?
If it's a straight yes or no, yes. We did much better at the World Championships on the athletic side than in Tokyo. I think with the 3-year cycle, a lot of our past Olympic medalists, what colour they got, are staying on in the sport to go for a real games with fans, and we'll hope to go one better. So yes.
OK, so yes from you, Steve?
A yes from me. Probably less golds than we've had before, but more medals.
All right, that's still success. And Kelly?
Yes, I think across the sports, without a doubt, I think we will continue with our winning streaks and medal hauls. But, how many goals? Let's see.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we will have to wait and see. Thank you very much then to Kelly, to Steve, Joe as well. This has been your countdown to Paris. You can keep up to date with all things Olympics on talkSPORT. And don't forget, we'll be bringing you a daily dose of the Games with the talkSPORT Olympics Daily Podcast, available on your favourite podcast provider.